Okay, so for those watching at home, they missed out. The reason why it's going to be a short video this week is because we took a field trip. We went to the Kalim mikveh and saw how pots and pans and forks and knives are immersed in the mikveh before they are brought into a Jewish home and used. And then we went, since we were there, and so it was still daylight, and there was no risk of encountering anyone, we went to the person mikveh and got a chance to see what that looks like. So that's what we did. Meanwhile, we are now, what are we up to? We're up to Roman numeral 2, right? We're starting a unit today, is that right?
I'm sorry, what?
We're starting a unit today. Roman numeral 2. Okay, in our syllabus. We're talking about Shabbat. This is huge. Okay? An extra one? Yes, I think so.
It's okay if you have.
Yeah.
I can share.
Here. It's a little bit. Sorry, it's a little bit. I think I got some coffee on it.
No worries. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, Roman numeral 2. We are dividing Shabbat into 2 halves. We're going to call Zachor and Shemor, the positive commandments of Shabbat and the negative, the prohibitions of Shabbat. This is based on the fact that Shabbat is described in the Ten Commandments twice. 10 Commandments appear in the Torah twice, in Exodus and also again in Deuteronomy. In Exodus, when it happens, when we reach Mount Sinai and God reveals the so-called 10 Commandments. And then in Deuteronomy, Moshe retells the story of the Jewish people. The whole history of the Jewish people is retold by Moses 40 years later, his valedictory speech, and the 10 Commandments are described again. There are some subtle differences among them. In Exodus it says, Zachor Yom Shabbat, you should remember the Sabbath day. And in Deuteronomy it says, Shemor Yom Shabbat, you should protect the Sabbath day. This is one of the reasons why we light 2 candles on Shabbat to symbolize that double aspect of Shabbat, that we remember it and then also that we preserve it and that we protect it. So this can be further developed as a distinction between the positive obligations of Shabbat and the negative obligations of Shabbat. Okay, so what are the positive obligations of Shabbat? Okay, there are several. Number 1 is Kiddush. We sanctify the Sabbath day by reciting Kiddush. Kiddush is said at the beginning of every Shabbat and every festival. It's our declaration that the day is holy. It's more than our declaration. It actually sanctifies the day. We make the day holy. Even though God declared Shabbat to be holy from Genesis, from when God rested on the 7th day, the day gets its character really from our observance of Shabbat. It's our rest that gives the day its identity. In fact, in Genesis, it says, the day is called Vaishbopish B'Yom HaShvi'i. God rested on the 7th day and sanctified it. So in Genesis, God's rest is on the 7th day. It's only when we, in Exodus, when the Jewish people keep Shabbat b'nei et HaShabbat, it's our observance of the day that actually gives it its identity as Shabbat. God resting is still makes it special, makes it sacred, but it's as the 7th day. The identity of the day as Shabbat is from our observance of the day, our resting on Shabbat.
But it's the same shalosh, it's the same root that Hashem is resting.
Yeah, God rested on the 7th day, as opposed to Shabbat as a noun referring to the 7th day of the week. That only comes in Exodus.
So it became a noun.
Yes, when we did it. And so each week we add sanctity to the day by reciting Kiddush. And we actually, if you can start Shabbat early, as we all do in this community, and it has all the full sanctity of the day, all the restrictions of the day begin when you make Kiddush. When you make Kiddush, that's when it starts. So that's so the zachor. It means remember. It also means to mention. Laskir is also to mention, to say out loud, to verbalize, to articulate. And so we say that the day is holy. We say it while holding a cup of wine. Many mitzvot in Judaism, many declarations, many brachot are said while holding a cup of wine. That adds formality, that adds significance to the mitzvah when said over a cup of wine. And Kiddush is no different. It's one of those mitzvot that's like that.
What's the difference between lighting the candles to accept Shabbat and Kiddush to?
So typically women will accept Shabbat when they light candles, and really at any moment, and men or women, if you haven't lit candles, if you're in shul and you say Kabbalat Shabbat, that also means Mashili Yom Shabbat. When you reach that point, that's also accepting Shabbat. If you haven't done any of those things until then when reciting Kiddush would be when you accept Shabbat. So even though you've maybe already accepted Shabbat, you still. It's like an interesting question. Somebody goes to shul and you say all the words of Kiddush, you say Vayachulu, that's all part of the Friday night prayers, and then you come home. You've probably already fulfilled your biblical obligation. And so when you come home, it's really more of a rabbinic obligation to then recite the words over a cup of wine, as opposed to the biblical obligation of Zachor Yom HaShabbat, to recall, to remember, to declare the day as the Shabbat day. You've done that already when you light candles or when you've been at shul.
Okay.
In fact, maybe even just saying Good Shabbos to somebody is enough to fulfill your biblical obligation, which is why some people will be very insistent of wishing Good Shabbos. Let's say in some communities, some families, let's say the husband goes to shul, so he says Marv, he says Oletz Filot, so he's fulfilled his biblical obligation. He's going to come home, he's going to make Kiddush for his family. His family, let's say they haven't been to shul, let's say they haven't davened Kabbalat Shabbat, they haven't recited Marv, they still have a biblical obligation.
Yes.
So he shouldn't be able to, a father shouldn't have been to shul, husband shouldn't be able to make Kiddush on behalf of his wife if she hasn't been to shul. Because he already fulfilled his biblical obligation, he just has the rabbinic obligation to recite these words. She still has a full biblical obligation, she said nothing yet. So if he says Good Shabbos to her and she says Good Shabbos back to him, so then maybe they're both equal then, they both, and then they both have that rabbinic obligation, he can recite Kiddush for his family. Men and women have an obligation to recite Kiddush, and so a woman who is by herself should recite Kiddush, a woman who knows how to recite Kiddush and her husband doesn't should recite Kiddush, a woman who's, should recite Kiddush before, if she's alone with her children, she should recite, not the child. And a woman can recite Kiddush for her husband. It's not common, but it's absolutely fine. Yes?
May I?
Please.
About candle lighting. So sometimes in extraordinary circumstances, a woman can light the Shabbat candles, still keeping in mind.
If you're gonna go to shul, yes, you can light candles. Also, you can have in mind you're lighting candles, but I'm not going to accept Shabbat right now because I'm going to get in the car and go to shul.
So that's my question about Kiddush. Can I have the same? Okay.
Not for Kiddush. Kiddush is you're done. You can't. Unless. Yeah, sometimes if you're, if it's like if it's like 2 p.m. and you're visiting a nursing home and you make Kiddush for all, they have like the Friday afternoon. This happens. You'll have the Jewish resident of the nursing home will gather for apple juice and cake or whatever Friday afternoon. So you'll make it. That's like educational. It's not. Okay. Do you know the word? Do we know the word? Do we look at it? Let's look at it Kiddush. Let's get a siddur out of it. Let's just before we move on.
Why is it common to use grape juice?
Yeah, good question.
No, normally we do except when you light the candles. It's only
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the rabbis established that many mitzvot are said while holding a cup of wine. Wine signified it was a very important drink. It was actually the only. It wasn't safe to drink water. For large stretches of European history, so wine was like a beverage, or depending on where you lived, it was some places it was beer and some places it was wine. It was a way to preserve calories. There was no refrigeration, so it was a way to preserve calories in barrels. So for nutrition, for calories, it was really alcohol was really important for civilization, and for hydration, all these as well. So it was a very important drink. So to say the blessing over wine was seen as a way to add significance to the blessing. So there are a number of blessings that are said while holding a cup of wine. Grape juice was not invented until the 19th century. Grape juice, if you take grapes and you make juice, it'll begin to ferment and turn into wine very, very quickly in a day or two. Grape juice is was invented by Dr. Thomas Welch, and it was basically he discovered if you pasteurize it, it'll last longer. And he was very involved. His church used wine for one of their sacraments, and he was a prohibitionist, and he wanted to. So he developed this like way for grape juice to remain the pasteurization process. Dr. Thomas Welch, I think Welch's grape juice named after him. So grape juice. So that started a whole. Halachic debate about whether or not grape juice could also be used instead of wine, and most people say it can be, but it's grape juice standing in for wine. People who can't, diabetics or people it's not safe to have wine or grape juice, they should have any beverage which is considered like an important, significant drink in the place where you live, like something that you would drink even if you aren't thirsty. So that would probably be something like tea or coffee. That was the advice, there was a woman who I once consulted with me. She had gestational diabetes. She couldn't have wine, she couldn't have grape juice. So, and it was Pesach, she had 4 cups, so she had 4 cups of tea. Yes?
I think that I read, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that I read that you should make, if you don't have wine, you should make kiddush over bread.
Correct. On Shabbat, you can make kiddush over bread if you have no wine. That's absolutely true.
Okay, but it's better to make it over bread than another drink?
Yes, correct.
Oh, I see.
For Shabbat, yes.
Bread or challah?
Challah, like you make kiddush and then
So how does this go? I mean, so instead Boret Priagafen, you're saying...
How much of that? So we wash first.
You wash first, okay.
The Germans do that anyway. The Germans always wash before kiddush, and everyone just sits quietly. Let's look at. Let's turn to the right page. Hold on.
382.
382.
It was bookmarked for me.
Great. The last time I taught it. Good. Here you are. So here you are. So the first part of kiddush, you'll notice the first paragraph is the end of Genesis 2. It's actually in the Hebrew Bible. It's the end of Genesis 1. The person who added the chapters to the Hebrew Bible was not Jewish, and I forget when he did it, but it was relatively recently in the history of the Bible. 383. 382. Yeah. So he thought that this is the beginning of chapter 2, but it's really the end of chapter 1, as we understand the Torah. At any event, you recite this declaration of from Genesis that talks about Shabbat. It's curious. Just the heavens and the earth were completed in all their array, and God finished on the 7th day from His work that He had done. I think there are versions. I think there's a Septuagint, some non-Jewish, some versions, like non-rabbinic Jewish versions, have this as the 6th day, right? Because He finished on the 6th day, and the 7th day. It's sort of odd, right? So it's a little bit. But we say the 7th day. It's actually there are I think 3. Asher Asa, 7 words. Vayishbot Bayom Hashvi'i Yikom Melachto Asher Asa, 7 words. Vayivarech Elohim at Yom Hashvi'i V'Kadesh Oto, 7 words. So there are 3 lines of 7 words, each centered on the phrase Bayom Hashvi'i, the 7th day. So probably 7th day is the correct version. It seems that the poetry worked.
The one that
No, it starts with the 6th day. It says at the very beginning.
Okay.
So that's the 6th day. That's the.
Okay. I was like, no.
It was evening, it was morning. The 6th day. That's the end of the prior verse. See that?
Okay.
And then God finished everything. Okay. So it's a little bit. It is a little bit ambiguous because if He's resting, did He rest or did He complete? What did He do on the 7th day? Did He rest or did He complete? So maybe He completed as the 6th day was turning into the 7th, right at that moment, that precise moment, or maybe the creation of Shabbat was itself the last act of creation. It's a little bit ambiguous. In any event, we recite this paragraph. It's declaring the day. It's considered a form of testimony that we're declaring the day, talking about the sanctity of the day. Then we say a blessing, Borei Pri Hagafen. That's the blessing anytime we drink wine and grape juice, so Borei Pri Hagafen. But instead of just drinking, we then recite the next paragraph is the actual Kiddush. This is the actual sanctification of the day, recited while holding this cup of wine, and this is Kiddush. Shek Hashem starts about, right? And you have made us holy through His commandments, favored us, and in love and favor gave us His holy Sabbath as a heritage, a remembrance of the work of creation. It's the first among the holy days of assembly, a remembrance of the exodus from Egypt. For You chose us and sanctified us from all the peoples, and in love and favor gave us Your holy Sabbath as a heritage. Thus You are who sanctifies the Sabbath. And then we sit down if we've been standing, and we drink the wine. And that's how Kiddush is done. Sometimes there's an inclusive. for visitors. Welcome. Because they're at 10, so we'll be in here.
You're supposed to sit before you drink?
Yeah. Sit before you drink. Some people sit for the all of Kiddush, which is that's probably, if you have no established customs, probably best to sit for Kiddush. And if you,
Do you have to sit down? Not necessarily.
to drink, you should sit down.
What about holding the cup while you're saying it versus having it on the
The
table?
cup has to be in your hand while you say
No,
it.
you stand during the blessing. You sit down.
Only one person has to drink. So one person can make Kiddush on behalf of everyone else who's listening, and only one person has to drink. It's customary for everyone to have a little bit, so either you pour a little bit for everyone, or once we have big meals, we stop doing that. So we just have, everyone has their own cup of wine or grape juice in their cup, a Kiddush beverage we call it, and then everyone drinks from their own cup. That's just easier. But really, no one has to drink, except for only one person has to drink. They don't have to drink all, and they have to drink just a cheekful. A what?
Kazite? Is that just?
No, not kazai.
That's bread.
That's right. Yeah, cheekful.
Mellow something.
Low lugma, very good. A cheekful. If you want to measure a cheekful, you fill your mouth with water, you spit it into a measuring cup, and half that amount is one cheekful.
How, I heard like there's some risk of drinking too much of the wine so that you need to say an after blessing. Is that a thing?
Not at Kiddush, because you're going to go right ahead and eat afterwards. So I don't think that would be a problem.
Someone was telling me there's something, like you shouldn't actually finish the cup of wine
Why?
so that it certainly is part of your meal. I don't know.
Oh, I see. If you drink the whole cup of wine
Yeah.
before the meal starts, then maybe you should say an after bracha before, because you want. Wow, that's firm. That's good. Okay, I've never heard that before. Okay,
No, it's
Yeah.
just the start of the meal. So even if you drink the whole cup, but then afterwards you're having a
more. Yeah. I haven't heard that. If you read it somewhere, I'm sure it has a good source. And
I think it was a dinner conversation.
oh, okay.
That's true.
Sabri moment. So should you say Sabri for everybody? Like
Savri is sort of like, I'm going to be the one making Kiddush. Thank you very much, folks. I'm going to do this. I'll handle this one.
is it for the family or is it for like a big group?
Why not? I don't know. It's not necessary to say ever, and it doesn't hurt to say it ever. So
What is it?
the Savri, like the by your leave, my masters, the Savri Ranan, which is like again like, I got this one, guys. Thanks.
Are you required to respond to it though so that someone's saying it on your
No.
behalf?
It's sort of implicit.
When you say, so like one person can say it for
Mhm.
the group, so like at, like how you say it on Saturday, that's like covers the group.
Oh yeah, when I have Kiddush, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
At
that's
Kiddush
the
you say it, and
exactly.
then that covers like everyone,
Exactly.
and everyone drinks.
yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Sometimes is there a custom like a big gathering for like the head of each family to?
Some people do it that way. I think that it's interesting.
I've seen it that way, like Passover. And stuff.
That's Pesach is different actually. When we get to Pesach, Pesach is different. Pesach, everyone has to have his own or her own cup and has to drink 4 cups. It's a separate passive obligation. Even so, the mitzvah of Kiddush can still be one person can recite on behalf of everyone, even at Pesach, even though everyone has to drink, even though Mel Shabbat, only one person has to drink. And you don't drink the whole cup. Pesach, you drink the whole cup, or most of the cup. Shabbat, you don't drink the whole cup. But some people have the custom, like I make Kiddush for my family, no matter what. Even if I'm a guest at someone else's house, I'll make Kiddush for my family or for myself. I think it's very common among Hasidim. Maybe Chabad does that. Other Hasidim do that. And when
Did what?
that each head of household will make Kiddush for his own family, even as a guest in someone else's home. So if you have 3 or 4 families eating together, there'll be 3 or 4 Kiddushes made in succession by each head of the household. That is.
They don't trust anyone.
No, trust. I don't know. It's like I don't know. When we Sarah and I we got married. We got married in September 2003. No, that's not true. We got married in September 2002. It was a long time ago. And we started hosting a lot of Shabbat meals back then. And I would always say, would anybody like to make his own Kiddush or her own Kiddush before I make Kiddush? And after about 10 or 15 years of doing that and nobody saying yes, I'd like to, I just stopped asking. I think the first 10 years of marriage, I think I asked, and then I stopped asking. But the truth is, that's because I maybe don't have a lot of Hasidim over. And when I was growing up, I guess I did spend a lot of Yantif and Shabbos with people who are more Hasidically oriented. influenced, and there it was very common for each head of household to make his own kiddush. So.
Are there any issues, let's say you're converting and you're at Kiddush with
Yeah.
an actual Jewish
Yeah.
family? Are there any issues with drinking the wine out of the same cup, or?
So if the wine is not mevushal, if you touch the wine, it becomes not kosher. Right? That's a kashrut issue, that wine that has not been cooked or boiled can only be touched but handled by someone Jewish. So if that's the case, they shouldn't be passing things.
Yeah.
The shul guidelines say that you should only use cooked or boiled wine. Yain mevushal will say on the label, and precisely because it's such a diverse community and a lot of people who are in various stages of conversion, or who knows what their status is, and they have friends, the neighbors over, and whatever. So we just say, unless you know everyone at your meal, in a very, very close way, and know about their status, you should only serve mevushal wine. And most of the American kosher wines, the Herzog wines, are mevushal, and most of the European ones are too, and some of the Israeli ones are also mevushal. If it's not mevushal, then you can drink your own wine, but you shouldn't be like passing it to someone else, or handling it.
Once
grape
the
juice
bottle's
is-
open, right?
Once the bottle's open,
Only
correct.
once the bottle's
Correct.
open.
And grape juice is all.
Grape juice is all mevushal because won't be grape juice if it's not, right? But the pasteurization
Yeah, I just wanna
process
make sure.
counts. Yeah.
And also because there's no alcohol, so it could also be.
No. That's actually a major
Wow.
topic in medieval, because again, wine was a major industry in the Middle Ages. People didn't drink water in Europe. It wasn't safe to drink water, so wine was a major industry. Jews were heavily involved in the wine trade, but Jewish communities were very, very small. They didn't have enough Jewish laborers to do the entire manufacture. They had a lot of Gentile employees involved in the winemaking. It's a lot of discussion on when
Wow.
you have to stop having, so if the Gentiles are in the vat stomping on the grapes, that seems to be okay, but once you take out the plug and the juice starts flowing out, then it's a problem, right? So where precisely at that moment is discussed in Masechet Avodah Zarah, in the Gemara, and there's a major issue of tremendous economic consequences for medieval Jewish in Europe, in France and the Rhineland, for major wine producing regions. Chaim Soloveitchik, the great historian, has written like 2 important books on Jews and medieval winemaking and discussing this. So, yes. Oh, you said that, raise your hand, I'm sorry. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Actually, I have 2 more.
Yeah, what 2 more, and we'll wrap up. Yeah.
Why is the blessing Borei Pri Hagafen not coming at the very end? And so isn't there some kind of hefsek?
Yeah, so it's not, you normally used to say the eating bracha right before you
Yes, exactly.
eat, but we also want to say the mitzvah bracha right before, like, the mitzvah is to say this declaration of Kiddush and then to drink the wine right away. And so you gotta, either way, neither one, it probably wouldn't really matter too much which order you did it, but because neither one is really a hefsek. They're both sort of one, it's sort of, it's like if you're, let's say you are using the toilet and then eating right after. So you wash your hands and you want to say, you leave the bathroom, you want to say an Asher Yatzar bracha, and you want to say an Netilat Yadayim bracha, because you're going to eat this afterwards, right? You're going to use the toilet and then you're going to eat lunch. So you don't have to leave and say the Asher Yatzar and then go back in and wash your hands again, and then come out and say, you could just say both brachot and they're not a hefsek for another. So that's another. Okay, let's pause here. Everyone's invited to stay for mincha, and we will meet again. Let's see. Are you meeting again with Sarah? Do you have a date for when you're meeting with Sarah?
Yes, we're meeting again
Monday.
Monday, but not next week. But
Monday the 18th.
Following.
Monday the 18th. Monday the 18th. So.
do you know what time? 8:15?
I have 8:15. Well, I have 8, but it should be 8:15.
So do you want to meet Monday? Oh, I can't meet. Oh, wait, Monday the 11th. I can do Monday the 11th.
That sounds possible.
No, I have a board meeting. I can't do Monday the 11th. I can do, hold on. I can do Tuesday the 12th. Nope, I have a meeting already scheduled. Wednesday the 13th. I can do Wednesday the 13th, but it has to be at our house, and because Sarah's out of town. So we can do Wednesday the 13th at our home, starting at 8:30. So the kids will
That's
be
next Wednesday.
next Wednesday the 13th of June. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. 8:30. Let's say 8:45. Do you mind making it a little bit later? That way,
8:45.
yeah. So my kids will be more likely to be asleep. I can get the house cleaned.
Address.
7:45 West Buckingham. Wednesday, June 13th at 8:45 p.m.
As long as they can sing lullabies to some of your children.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah, whatever. You know, school's over, so we'll see how that works. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This was fun. All right. I had fun. I hope you did. I shouldn't say it's fun. It's not fun. All right.
Do you need me for the minyan?
We might.